let's talk about how your life's changed in the last few years.
Sure.
Because, before Subtle Arts, which is orange, by the way, just in case people don't know, you hadn't written a book, right? Yeah. What's it like to go from that to this book? New York Times bestseller for, years, right? 6 million copies. I mean, most authors are probably super envious of you. You become famous. You're writing books with Will Smith. What's that like as far as a life adjustment?
I don't know. I mean, in totality, like when we sit here right now and look back on it, it feels very surreal and it feels sudden, but it's weird because when you're going through it, even though it happened quickly over the course of 3 years, like it still felt gradual, Like for instance, with Subtle Art, when it started taking off, a few months after it came out, I kept telling I get emails or calls from my publisher, my editor, saying like, oh, we sold this this many copies this week, or oh, we're about to hit 1 million. And in my head, I keep telling myself, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, it's temporary. I'm having a good run at it, but it's gonna drop off. And now we're 3.5 years into it or something. I think it was #1 last week still.
Wow.
So it's, to me, it's just the entire time I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, well, don't get too invested in it. Don't get too attached to it, because it's likely it's not gonna last, but it just keeps lasting. So it's actually been a very strange experience for me. And it was the same thing with the Will Smith thing, So he came, his team reached out, and I had some conversations with my agent, and she was very honest. She, as an agent should be, she was like, look, most celebrity books don't happen. Most of them, it's a lot of talking, so like don't get too excited. And so I really went into it without expectations, kind of like, all right, well, it'd be cool to hang out with Will Smith, but we'll see what happens. And we're writing it, like it's actually happening, so it's, I think from the outside, it looks like this like huge, it's like Mark jumped on a roller coaster, look at him go, but from the inside, it's this very strange kind of uncertain experience of not knowing if what you're experiencing is actually real,
right,
or is gonna last.
Okay, and because of your Buddhist background and everything in the book, you're kind of pre-trained to handle something like this.
Well, my mind kind of automatically goes that way anyway. Like I think some people have the opposite reaction. It's their book takes off and they're like, well, it's about damn time the world knows how brilliant I am, And right. I think that gets people in a lot of trouble, because at some point you're not going to be on top. I've always had the opposite reaction of like, I don't know if this is such a great thing. I don't know if this is going to last. Enjoy it for the moment, but don't get too wrapped up in it. I'd rather be too humble than too full of myself. Yeah. And so I try to err on excess humility.
What's been the coolest thing that's happened on the back of this book? I mean, I know you met Will Smith hanging out with Pele, but what's been that one like single moment where you're like, wow, this is kind of crazy?
Yeah. I think, so there are a lot of exciting moments like that, like meeting Pele. But honestly, like the best moments are the stories that I get from people. So I did an event in Australia a few days ago, and it was funny because I did like a little meet and greet before the event, and this young woman, about 20 years old, she comes in with her parents. And she starts talking to me. She's like, oh, I'm a big fan, whatever. And the mom starts talking to me, and she's like, yeah, she made me read your book and blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, like the father, he's probably mid-60s, like big, like man's man, he's like old school Australian dude. And he's just bawling, like he's just crying.
Wow.
And then the mom said, oh, he's already emotional. And she said he's a cancer survivor, and when he was going through chemo, he read your book over and over again, and he's just like sobbing in front of me. So it's moments like that to answer your question. It's moments like that it that feels so much more powerful. Like, look, I'm proud of the New York Times list, and I'm proud of millions of copies or whatever, and it's great having money. But it's moments like that I'm like, oh shit, I really did something.
Yeah. Why do you think it pops so much, the book?
It's a good question. I think it's a confluence of a lot of things. You know, I would love to take credit for all of it, but I think it's, you know, the joke I make is like, I'll take credit for the first million, but you know, everything past that, it's like, I have no idea what's happening. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think part of it is I did nail the message, and I nailed the tone and the style. Like, I think it really, for the self-help genre, I think it really is it's a unique and a new style that people were very hungry for. On top of that, I think just the timing. You know, one thing I noticed was when there's been a lot of political problems. I know here in the UK, there's with Brexit and everything. In the US, you have Trump. Australia's had a lot of problems. I started noticing a lot of these countries, when the political problems would kind of flare up, sales would go up. So I think there's something about this moment in the world where people are, you know, in the airport, they're like, wow, I really wish I didn't give so much of a fuck. I really wish I cared less. So it's great title, great marketing. The book's really good, but it's also the kind of the zeitgeist that we're in right now. Right. People are overly anxious, overly upset, and they understand that they're more anxious and upset than they should be about things.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of like tribalism and divisiveness and people kind of angry, and then there's social media, which heightens it, and then people feel disconnected from social media, and maybe people can't put their finger on it, but they know that they need something to stop feeling that way.
Yeah.
And then I guess your book comes up, and it seems like it's a good solution, and the title kind of implies that, right?
Yeah, and I think it's that title in particular, the subtle art, it seems to play very well, like on Instagram, for instance. Like, I think I managed to make self-help cool. You know, most people who buy self-help books, you're not like showing them to all you're not like, oh, hey, check it out, I got relationship problems. You know, like it's there's a little bit of shame.
It's an industry that's mocked easily.
Yes.
Even though it helps a lot of people, but a lot of people point the finger. We're real good at that in Britain as well.
Yes.
So, but your book has a way of kind of mocking yourself while you're doing it, or?
Yeah, I think there's an edginess to it.
Right.
You know, where people are like, yeah, I'm gonna stop giving a fuck. You know, and then they like snap a picture with themselves with, like, they're excited to snap a picture with it.
Right.
And that's, you know, my goal, even going back to my blogging days, you know, my goal was always, I always felt self-help had gotten a little bit too airy-fairy, you know, just be positive, just follow your dream. You know, like everything was, I think there needed to be a correction. There needed to be a little bit more pessimism and cynicism in the self-help world. And so I very much saw my role as like, I want to bring that. And I think I just underestimated how much of a demand for that there was.
Right. Even though it's not necessarily a pessimistic or cynical book. It's actually, but it kind of calls people on their BS and says, this is what you have to do. It's going to take hard work.
Yeah.
But let's be honest about what it is. And,
yes.
And it's a different way of looking at things.
Yeah, I've started calling it pessimistic self-help, but pessimism more in like a philosophical sense, and that like I genuinely think like humans, like we suck. Like humans, like we kind of suck at things. You know, like we're not very rational. We're not objective at all. We're very selfish and prejudiced, and you know, all these things that psychology has been showing us for decades. And so I was kind of living in that psych research, doing my blog, and then meanwhile I'm like looking at the self-help industry, and it's like, oh yeah, if you just believe in yourself, you know, everything's gonna go great. It's like, well, no, you're gonna be a narcissist. You know, if you just believe everything you think, like that's narcissism. So I see it as like, let's start at, as you said, being honest about our flawed nature. Our brains are not optimized. We didn't evolve for truth or happiness. We evolved for survival. And so a lot of the mechanisms in our psychology that helped us survive make us unhappy and make us irrational or unobjective. And so that should be the starting point for any self-improvement.